At Easter dinner, I sat at the table listening to my brother Beckett and his wife Tamsin talk about their big kitchen remodel plans. They were excited, describing marble counters, custom cabinets, and all the things they wanted. I stayed quiet, like I always did, because I already knew what was coming next. They were hoping I would pay for it, just like I had paid for almost everything else over the years. But then Tamsin laughed, looked straight at me, and said, "You're not really part of this family. You're just the ATM." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I felt something inside me shift. In that moment, I realized exactly how they saw me. Not as a sister, not as a daughter, but as a source of money. I excused myself early, went home, and sat in my quiet apartment thinking about all the times I had helped them. Emergency dental bills, school fees, short-term loans that were never paid back, even their luxury SUV. I had done it all out of love, and somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing it as kindness. They started seeing it as my duty. That night, I made a decision. The gravy train was closed. A month later, Beckett called me, confused and frustrated, asking why the $28,000 he expected from me for the remodel hadn't arrived. I calmly told him I never agreed to it. His shock quickly turned into anger. Tamsin tried guilt-tripping me about family values, but I didn't budge. I suggested they consider a cheaper remodel. She hung up on me. Soon after, Beckett showed up at my door, furious. He said I was jealous of his perfect family life, and that I was being petty over a little joke. I reminded him I had given them $51,200 over the years and asked when repayment would start. He couldn't answer. He just stormed out, calling me selfish. Then my parents called. They always took his side. They told me to be forgiving, told me Beckett was stressed, told me money wasn't more important than family. I asked them a simple question. If family is more important than money, then why does everyone only call me when they need money? There was a long, heavy silence. From that point on, everything became clearer. They posted luxury spa days online, expensive golf weekends, a family cruise. Then my mother still asked me to help with Beckett's property taxes. It was obvious they weren't struggling. They were just comfortable using me. That Easter was the last time I let myself be treated like an ATM. It hurt, but it also freed me. I didn't lose a family that loved me. I let go of people who only loved what I could give them. And for the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life again. When I got home after that Easter dinner, I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I had kept for 8 years. I started it a long time ago just so I wouldn't forget how much I had loaned my brother and his family. I never planned to use it for anything serious. It was just a way to stay organized. But that night, looking at the numbers felt completely different. Every line told a story. The emergency dental bill I paid when Beckett said he was in terrible pain. The school fees they said they would return next month. The down payment for their SUV because they wanted something safe and comfortable for the kids. The many smaller amounts they needed, just until next payday. When I added everything up again, the total was $51,200. Seeing that number made me sit back in silence. I knew it was a lot, but I never realized just how much it had grown. As I scrolled through the list, I remembered how things used to be. In the early years, Beckett and Tamsin always said thank you. They brought small gifts to my place, or they called to tell me how grateful they were. But slowly the tone changed. The thank yous stopped. The requests became faster, sharper, and almost expected. They stopped asking and started assuming. I also remembered the little comments they threw my way. Tamsin would laugh and say things like, "Well, Sage doesn't have kids, so she doesn't really understand responsibility." Beckett would joke that I had all the free time in the world because I was a career woman. They acted like my life was easy, like I didn't have bills, stress, or worries of my own. I worked hard for everything I had. But they talked as if money just appeared for me, as if helping them should be simple and automatic. Looking at the spreadsheet brought all of those memories back, and not in a cruel way, just in a clear way. For the first time, I saw the pattern right in front of me. I wasn't helping because they needed help. I was helping because they expected me to help. And I kept saying yes because I didn't want to cause problems in the family. But now the facts were right there, laid out in rows and columns. I had given so much, and they had taken even more. They didn't see how much I carried. They didn't see how hard I worked to build my life. They only saw what I could provide. I stared at the final number again. $51,200. I told myself something I had never said before. I don't owe them any more. Not money. Not explanations. Not silence. The spreadsheet didn't just show the money I had lost. It showed the moment I finally opened my eyes. The first real test came only a few weeks after Easter. I was at work when my phone started ringing again and again. When I finally answered, it was Beckett, and he sounded confused, rushed, and a little angry. He told me the contractor needed the $28,000 deposit for the kitchen remodel, and they were waiting for my transfer. He spoke as if the money was already promised, as if this was just a small delay on my side. I kept my voice calm as I told him I had never agreed to pay for the remodel. I reminded him that he mentioned the idea at dinner, but I never said yes. He went silent for a few seconds, like he couldn't believe what he heard. Then he asked again, slower this time, as if maybe I misunderstood my own words. I repeated the same thing. I wasn't paying for the remodel. The confusion quickly turned into panic. He said the contractor was holding their spot, that they already picked the tiles and cabinets, that everything was set. I told him I understood, but it didn't change my answer. I wasn't responsible for a decision they made without me. He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Tamsin called. Her voice was shaking like she had been crying. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this. She said the kids were excited, the house needed an upgrade, and family was supposed to help each other. She started talking about family values, saying I was breaking the unity of the family by refusing. She made it sound like I was betraying them, not the other way around. I listened to her without interrupting. When she finished, I simply told her they could still remodel, but they might need to choose something more affordable. I even suggested doing the project in small steps, so they didn't have to take on too much at once. The moment I said cheaper, the tears stopped. Her tone changed instantly. She told me I was being judgmental, that I didn't understand what a family home needed. Then she ended the call. After that, no one said anything for the rest of the day. It felt strange, almost quiet. But inside, I felt steady. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel like I had to fix everything. They planned a remodel assuming I would pay. I simply corrected their assumption. I knew this was only the beginning. They weren't used to hearing no from me. But I also knew one thing. If I gave in this time, nothing would ever change. And I was finally ready for things to change. 2 days after the remodel calls, I heard loud knocking on my condo door. I knew immediately it was Beckett. He didn't text, didn't call, he just showed up. When I opened the door, he pushed his way inside without waiting for an invitation. His face was red, and he looked like he had been building up anger the whole drive over. He started talking fast. He said he couldn't believe I was doing this to him. He said I was acting jealous of his perfect family life, that I didn't understand what real responsibilities looked like, and that I was punishing him over a harmless joke at Easter. He kept pacing around my living room, waving his hands, making it seem like I had caused some huge disaster. I let him talk, because nothing I said would matter until he ran out of words. When he finally stopped, I asked him to sit down. He refused. So I stood there and spoke calmly, even though my heart was pounding. I told him I wasn't jealous. I told him I wasn't angry about the joke. I was simply done being treated like a bank. Then I told him the number, $51,200. I said it slowly so he could really hear it. I told him that was the total amount I had given him and his family over the past 8 years. He froze for a moment, like he wasn't sure what to say. Then he told me I made the number up. I walked to my table, picked up the printed summary from my spreadsheet, and handed it to him. Every date, every amount, every reason. He didn't even look at it. He just crumpled the paper in his hand and threw it back on the table. That's when I asked the question I had avoided for years. When will you start paying me back? His eyes narrowed, like I had insulted him. He said families didn't keep score, and only selfish people cared about money. He said I was the one breaking the family apart by asking for repayment. He tried to twist the whole situation so he could walk out feeling like the victim. I didn't argue. I just repeated the question. When will you start paying me back? Hearing it again made him furious. He said I had changed, that I wasn't the sister he used to know, and that I was cold and heartless. Then he marched toward the door. Before leaving, he pointed at me and said, "You're selfish." Then he slammed the door so hard the picture on my wall rattled. When the apartment finally went quiet again, I sat on the couch and took a deep breath. Part of me felt shaken, but a bigger part of me felt something new, peace. I had told the truth. I had stood my ground. If defending myself made me selfish in his eyes, I could live with that. The day after Beckett stormed out of my condo, my phone started ringing again. This time it was my mother. I could already guess what the call was about. The moment I answered, she didn't even ask how I was doing. She went straight into a long speech about family unity. She said Beckett was under a lot of pressure as a father and husband. She said I should try to be more understanding, that I should let go of hurt feelings, and remember that family comes first. I listened quietly. I knew she wasn't calling to hear my side. She was calling to remind me of my role in the family, the role they had created for me. When she finally paused, I asked her a simple question. If family really comes before money, why does everyone only call me when money is needed? She didn't answer. She just sighed loudly and said I was being dramatic. Later that evening, my father called. He rarely reached out unless something serious was happening, so I knew Beckett must have told them his version of the story. My father's voice was firm but calm at first. He said he heard there was a problem between me and Beckett. He said he hoped I would correct it, because siblings should support each other. Then he explained how stressful it was for Beckett to raise 2 kids and keep up with the house. He talked about bills, responsibilities, the pressure of being a parent, everything except the way they had been using me for years. I told him the truth. I told him I wasn't refusing out of anger. I was refusing because I had already given too much. I explained that I wanted boundaries, not fights. But he didn't want to hear it. He said I should have more compassion, that Beckett needed me, and that holding on to money was not worth breaking the family apart. Again, I asked the same question I had asked Mom. If this is about family and not about money, why does everyone only contact me when money is the issue? There was a long silence on the other end. Then his tone hardened. He told me I was becoming calculating, that I was thinking too much about numbers and not enough about love. He made it sound like having boundaries meant I didn't care about them anymore. I stayed calm. I told him I cared, but I wasn't going to keep letting myself be drained. That only made him sigh angrily. Finally he said, I raised you to be better than this, and ended the call. I sat there staring at my phone for a long moment. It hurt to hear my own father say that. But underneath the sadness, there was something clearer. Finally, I understood how deep the pattern went. They weren't calling to solve anything. They were calling to pull me back into the role I had broken out of. And for the first time, I didn't let them pull me. After all the calls from my parents, I tried to give myself some space from the whole situation. But even with distance, the truth kept showing up in small, quiet ways. It started with Tamsin's social media posts. I wasn't even trying to look, but they popped up on my feed. She had signed up for a luxury spa membership, the kind that cost more in a month than some people spent on groceries. Every week she posted photos of facials, massages, and fancy lobbies. The captions always said things like self-care is essential. It confused me. Just days before, she and Beckett had acted like they were drowning financially. They begged me for help with the kitchen remodel. But clearly, they had money for spa days. Then I noticed Beckett's posts. He was going on golf weekends with his friends. Expensive resorts, new golf gear, steak dinners. He called them stress breaks, but they didn't look cheap. Again, this was the same man who yelled at me about ruining his life because I wouldn't give him $28,000. The more I saw, the more the whole picture became clear. They didn't lack money. They just didn't want to spend their own money when they could use mine. A few weeks later, I saw something that truly sealed everything in place. The whole family, Beckett, Tamsin, the kids, and even my parents, went on a cruise together. A real cruise. Ocean views, themed dinners, matching outfits. They all seemed relaxed and happy. I didn't get an invitation, which didn't bother me. What bothered me was the thought that they would spend thousands on a trip like that, but cry to me about bills. I didn't say anything. I just watched quietly. Then, a couple of days after they returned, my mom called again. Her voice had that soft, serious tone she used when she wanted something. She said Beckett was having a hard time catching up and asked if I could help cover his property tax bill. As she spoke, I pictured the cruise photos, the spa visits, the golf weekends, the laughs, the matching shirts on the deck. I asked her how they could afford a cruise if things were so hard. She quickly said it was a family bonding moment, like that explained everything. She didn't see the contradiction. Or maybe she did but didn't want to admit it. When the call ended, I sat there quietly. I didn't feel angry anymore. The pattern was so clear now that it almost felt simple. They weren't struggling. They were comfortable. And whenever something expensive came up, they expected me to fix it so they didn't have to sacrifice anything. The truth was fully in the open, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. A few weeks later, the real test came. This time, it wasn't about a remodel or a bill they didn't feel like paying. It was about Lila, their youngest. Beckett called me early in the morning, and I could hear the strain in his voice. He said Lila needed a small outpatient surgery. Nothing major, nothing dangerous, but still something that needed to be done soon. Then he told me about the high deductible and how they couldn't cover it right now. For the first time in a long while, I felt a real worry, not for him, but for Lila. She was innocent in all of this. She didn't ask to be part of money games. She didn't know anything about the pressure they kept putting on me. So I listened as he explained how urgent it was. He said they needed help immediately. He said they wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He said this time it was truly an emergency. But I had learned something over the past months. I knew how fast they turned real concerns into excuses for cash. So instead of giving a direct yes, I asked for the hospital information. He paused, confused, and tried to say we could handle that later, if I just sent the money first. I didn't respond to that. I repeated the question. After a long silence, he gave me the details. As soon as we ended the call, I contacted the hospital myself. I explained the situation clearly and asked if I could pay the deductible directly to Lila's account. They checked, confirmed it, and accepted the $1,200 payment right away. I didn't put my name on anything. I didn't want them to twist it later or claim they handled it themselves. I just wanted the bill covered so Lila could get the care she needed. When everything was complete, I texted Beckett. I told him the deductible was paid and the hospital had all the information. I also said I wasn't giving any cash. The money went exactly where it needed to go. Nothing more, nothing less. His reply came quickly. At first he thanked me. Then, only seconds later, another message arrived asking why I didn't trust him enough to hand him the money directly. He said it made him feel small. He said families shouldn't treat each other like that. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply reminded him that the important part was done. Lila was taken care of. For once, everything was clear. I was willing to help in real emergencies, but I wouldn't be used anymore. And this time, the money went exactly where it belonged. A few weeks later, the tension finally spilled into the open. The whole family had gathered for a reunion, and I knew I couldn't avoid them forever. I tried to stay calm, keeping to myself and avoiding too much conversation. But it didn't take long before Tamsin and Beckett started talking about me. They painted a picture that was completely false. They told everyone I was cold, selfish, and only cared about money. Tamsin whispered that I hoarded my wealth and refused to help anyone. Beckett added that I was a spinster who had no real responsibilities and couldn't understand what family really meant. Some relatives nodded, others looked uncomfortable, but the words stung. For a moment, I wanted to yell, to defend myself, to tell the truth. But I stayed quiet and watched. As the reunion went on, I realized that words alone weren't enough. People would believe whatever they wanted if I didn't show them proof. That's when I decided it was time to act. Quietly, without creating a scene, I had brought copies of my spreadsheet with me. I had printed it out neatly, showing every gift, every loan, and every payment I had made to Beckett and Tamsin over the past 8 years. Alongside those numbers, I highlighted their major purchases. The SUV, the golf trips, the spa memberships, and the cruise. During a break, I handed the copies to a few key family members, ones I knew would look at them carefully. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't argue with anyone. I just let the evidence speak for itself. Within minutes, people started reading, whispering, and looking surprised. The expressions on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They could see exactly what had happened. My years of giving and their years of taking without acknowledgement were all right there in black and white. It was undeniable. The hypocrisy of their complaints was clear. The image Beckett and Tamsin had tried to paint of me was shattered. By the end of the reunion, the tension shifted. I wasn't attacked anymore. I wasn't called selfish. Instead, there was a quiet understanding. Some relatives came to me privately, apologizing for believing the stories, and quietly thanking me for showing them the truth. My parents didn't comment much, but the smugness and assumptions they had carried for years were gone. For the first time, I felt a sense of relief. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to fight. The spreadsheet did what words couldn't. It showed the truth. And the truth was finally visible to everyone who mattered. For the first time, Beckett and Tamsin couldn't manipulate the story. The family knew exactly what had happened, and I finally felt like I had taken control of my own story. After I quietly handed out the spreadsheet at the family reunion, the effect was immediate, even if no one said much at first. It was like a silent earthquake. Everything shifted, but slowly, almost carefully. People were reading, looking shocked, whispering to each other, and realizing things they had only suspected. My aunt was the first to reach out. She called me later that evening, her voice low and gentle. She said she had always sensed something was wrong, that Beckett and Tamsin depended on me too much, but she had never seen the proof. She thanked me for showing the numbers and said she finally understood what had been happening for years. A cousin did the same. They had noticed how I always said yes to requests, and how my parents often stayed quiet, letting the situation slide. Now they could see the full scale of it. They offered quiet support, not judgment or advice, just understanding. Even my parents were affected. For years, they had pretended not to notice or had excused Beckett and Tamsin, blaming me for being too strict or too calculating. But now, seeing the actual numbers and dates, they could no longer ignore the truth. They were silent when I spoke to them after the reunion. There were no lectures, no reminders about family unity, no calls to forgive. They finally had to face the reality that their own favoritism and excuses had allowed Beckett and Tamsin to exploit me for years. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, but also a recognition that they had been wrong. Beckett and Tamsin, on the other hand, were completely isolated. Their usual stories and complaints no longer worked. They tried to talk to relatives, to explain, to make themselves look like the victims, but nobody listened the same way anymore. Everyone had seen the spreadsheet. Everyone had seen the facts. Their excuses sounded hollow, their guilt-tripping meaningless. They had lost control of the narrative they had built for years. For the first time, I felt a calm sense of relief. The quiet support from family members I trusted, combined with the visible proof, made it impossible for Beckett and Tamsin to manipulate anyone anymore. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the villain they painted me to be. The truth was finally clear, and it worked in my favor. It was a turning point. The family dynamic I had struggled with for so long had shifted. People who had once ignored or doubted me now stood quietly on my side. Those who had tried to pressure me for money had no one to back them up. And I realized, for the first time, that my boundaries were respected, my choices mattered, and my voice finally carried the weight it deserved. The balance had changed, and I could finally breathe. After everything, I didn't get the apology I had secretly hoped for. Beckett and Tamsin didn't come to me with tears or remorse. Instead, there was silence. At first, it felt strange and empty, but over time, that silence turned into a kind of brittle, formal respect. They didn't push me for money anymore. They didn't make jokes about me being the ATM. They barely mentioned me at all, but I could feel the change. For the first time in years, I could focus on myself without guilt. I started planning things I had always wanted to do, but never had the freedom to pursue. One of the first things I did was book a solo trip to Iceland. Just me, a camera, and the northern lights. No responsibilities to anyone else, no constant requests, no pressure. I felt lighter, like I had been carrying the weight of other people's lives on my shoulders, and had finally put it down. Thanksgiving came, and I went to the family gathering with a small, simple pie I had baked myself. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't expensive. It didn't need to be. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody expected anything from me. I realized then how much my life had changed. For years, I had been defined by what I could provide, but now I was defined by who I was. I could set boundaries, make decisions for myself, and not feel guilty. The $51,200 I had given them over the years had cost me my patience, my energy, and a lot of trust. But it had also taught me something invaluable. The importance of standing firm, of saying no, and of protecting myself. Each time I refused to hand over money for something unnecessary, each time I set a limit, I bought back a little piece of my self-respect. It hurt at first, but in the end it was worth it. The old family dynamic, where I was the default helper, the silent provider, the one who could always be counted on financially, was gone. That role no longer existed. I wasn't just free from their expectations. I was free to live my own life fully. Looking back, the financial ledger is closed. Every dollar, every gift, every loan, they all have their place in the past. But the emotional ledger is what really matters. And now, finally, it's in the black. I have my dignity. I have my peace. I have my life. The ATM is officially out of service, and for the first time in years, I feel whole. Do you think I did the right thing by finally saying no to my brother and his wife, Or should I have kept helping them? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more real-life family stories.